Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news, interviews, and fun for the WordPress community. Now, welcome your host, Nathan Wrigley. Hello there, and welcome once again to the WP Builds podcast. You've reached episode number 458, entitled Unpacking the Clever Content Area Block with Ian Svoboda. It was published on Thursday, the 26th of February, 2026. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and before we get into the podcast with Ian, a very small piece of housekeeping. I'm simply going to say that if you enjoy WP Builds, why not give us a like on your favourite social media platform, maybe retweet what we produce. Also, head to wpbuilds.com/subscribe to find out more. If, however, you have a product or work for a company that has a product or service in the WordPress space and you feel that you'd like a little marketing nudge, you'd like a little bit of promotion out there and would like to find a WordPress specific audience, well, guess what? That's exactly what we have, a WordPress specific audience. If you'd like your product or service mentioning in WP Builds and getting right into the ears of people in the WordPress community, head to wpbuilds.com/advertise to find out more, or just drop me an email, admin@wpbuilds.com, and I'll get back to you ASAP. Okay, I lied to you. I said I only had one piece of housekeeping. I have another, and that is to say, don't forget we have the This Week in WordPress show, which we do every Monday. We do it live so that the audience can comment, and we really, really appreciate those people who show up to do that. Monday, 2 p.m. UK time at the easy-to-remember URL, wpbuilds.com/live. We'll send it out to you as a podcast episode the following day. And you're consuming the episode that we produce every Thursday, so we'll do that as well. So the cadence really is Monday, the live show, repurposed on Tuesday, and also the podcast episode on Thursday. So there you go. That's the skinny on what we do at WP Builds. Okay, that really is it for the housekeeping this week. So what are we doing today? Well, today I am chatting with Ian Svoboda. I make an apology at the beginning. We also talk oddly about where he lives, Jacksonville, and how big it is, which is a bit of a peculiar rabbit hole to go down. But I talk about the fact that I came across Ian's plugin called the Content Area Block and was slightly confused about what it did, so mentioned it on the This Week in WordPress show, but really got it completely wrong. So got in touch with Ian, and he's here today to straighten out what the plugin is for. And essentially, it solves this problem. Why do we only have one content area in WordPress? So I know that you can overcome that with all sorts of clever things, custom fields and whatnot. But Ian's whole thing is, why don't we just have multiple content areas? And so he's built a plugin which achieves that. So we talk about his history with WordPress, what the problem is that he was trying to solve, how he solves it, the technical implementation that he put in place, what the constraints are around it, technical challenges, and how it might be used in a editorial workflow. So it's a really interesting episode. Honestly, a really interesting product, and I hope it has great success, and I hope that you enjoy the podcast. I am joined on the podcast by Ian Svoboda, whose surname I am happy to pronounce correctly, I think. I got the thumbs up. Did I get it right?
You did.
Nice.
You did.
Nice. First shot. Great stuff. I'm being joined by Ian because, well, I have to apologise publicly to Ian, and I suspect he's then going to sort of return the favour. A few weeks ago on This Week in WordPress, I just sort of scour the WordPress news, and if curious, interesting stuff comes my way, I tend to put it into that show. And one of the things that often happens is like, new shiny plugin or plugin that I've never seen before, pop it into the show and then try to understand what it does, and failed miserably to understand what Ian's plugin does. And it's called Content Area Block, and he's here to set the record straight, to make us understand what it actually does. So first of all, Ian, hi, and do you want to just tell us who you are, where you live, and all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here. My name is Ian, as Nathan said, and I am a WordPress developer / software engineer. I've worked on other things besides WordPress, but WordPress has been my main focus for the last, 13 plus years now. So I've been doing this a long time. Mm-hmm. I started off working at an agency for web.com back when they were just web.com. And then I've worked at a lot of smaller agencies. I've worked at like bigger agencies like 10 Up. I've done a little bit of core contributing. I've done some product work on plugins that you may have heard of, like Generate Blocks / Generate Press, Search and Filter, certain other plugins like that.
Wow.
So I've gotten my mitts in all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, you really have.
But
Gosh, I mean,
Yeah.
every one of those things that you just named, I've either used or heard of a lot. That's fascinating.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a privilege to work on these things.
Yeah.
And, you know, I live in Jacksonville, Florida, where no companies to speak of are headquartered besides web.com / Newfold Digital, ironically enough. But it's been really nice to be able to work with so many different people in different countries and do this stuff.
Yeah.
It's been a big privilege to work on cool products like that. It's one of the things I love about my job.
Yeah, I'm going to segue in the most unexpected way. When I was significantly younger than I am now, I drove a car down the east coast of America, and I drove past Jacksonville. And I had a guidebook, and I have, for reasons that I cannot remember, you just said Jacksonville, and this fact came back into my head. At the time that I drove past Jacksonville, by square mileage, was the biggest city on earth. Even though it might have like this, I don't know, tiny population compared to like Tokyo or something like that. I don't even know if that squares with the reality that you
I mean,
know.
I couldn't speak to the whole world, but I can tell you it is one of the largest cities, if not the largest in the United States by pure land mass.
Yeah. Well,
a lot of times, how do I put this? Like, if you think about, like, say, the LA metropolitan area,
Yep.
right? They Los Angeles is huge, but Los Angeles, there's like LA County, and then there's like the surrounding areas outside of that. So our county, Duval, as we say here, it's all Jacksonville. It's all just one enormous thing.
Yeah.
So population wise, it's not as big, of course, as like Chicago, New York, but it is nice and spread out.
It's
you know, for
probably
me, I
about the
kinda
same
like it a
size
little bit.
as Wales or something like that. You know, where I live, it's probably the size of an entire country. No, I'm not joking.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
pick up the UK and you can sort of tessellate it perfectly, you can fit it 4 times into Texas. All of it, you know, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland goes
It's
into.
so wild to
Yeah,
think
I
about.
know, it really is.
It's like a
wild.
whole country.
And we have 70 odd million people. Anyway, there's my digression. Let's get it back to WordPress and the plugin that you've got. So, content area
Sure.
block, caught sight of it, saw it on the repo, kind of thought I'd understood it, put it on the show. Turns out, as I was saying, as I was reading the description, it occurred to me that I hadn't a clue. And so I backpedaled pretty quickly, like, is this how it works? Is that how it works? No. I got everything wrong. Tell us what it does. Put the record straight. It's fascinating.
Okay, so the first thing I have to say is that I am so glad that you were confused by it, because I realized that I did not explain it well enough. I was looking at my own description for this, and I'd written I have a course that I'm making, and I have like a newsletter where I write, you know, I like put out a post and I notify people about it every week. And so as I was writing this up, I was like, oh man, I didn't really do that great of a job explaining this, because if it is meant to be something that a non-nerd would be able to use, it should be something that's a lot easier to understand. And then I'd explain it to, say, my friend Ross, and he's a, you know, hardcore developer himself who also similarly did not exactly understand.
Okay, so it's not just an audience of
It
one.
is not just you. I felt compelled to not only make a video about it, but I thought, why don't I tell you? And then that way I can get some feedback from a person who, you know, I don't have any like experience, who wouldn't have any reason to lie to me.
Yeah.
Who could tell me,
Okay.
does this make more sense?
Yeah.
And then you go, that makes way more sense.
Well,
So I'm about that.
I felt like really pleased when you sent that. I don't know if you've made that video, and like I can't remember if you sent it to me directly or I watched it from start
did.
to finish, and by the end of it I was like, oh, okay. But not just like, okay,
Yeah.
that's so obvious now, but also, oh, what a great idea.
Thank you.
It's a
I
great
appreciate
idea.
that. Because this is really interesting. Before I get into any technical details, maybe I'll start with what the impetus of this whole idea was.
Uh-huh.
There was this is actually this scenario is a common thing I've encountered in my whole career on many different projects and site builds, where you have a designer, say, or, you know, a team of people. They put together this plan for this template, and they say, we want it to work this way and the other. And they don't know about WordPress, technical limitations or whatever. They're just coming up with cool ideas. How can we make this page useful for people? And so they had this post type. This is for a news website. And the site had this one main content section that was kind of in the middle. So there was some static, well, it's not static, but there were like blocks you couldn't really change per post. They were dynamic, but you didn't mess with those in the post content. And they had those, and they had like a little area for post content things to go. But then down below, it had this thing that was like a timeline. And so the concept is they're making a topic, say, about healthcare in a certain healthcare subject or whatever, and they want to show a timeline of events. And so they wanted to be able to go in there and put in like a year and then certain months inside of the year, maybe not every month, but some months. And then inside of those, be able to say, okay, here's a story that relates to that. Here's just a text note that we're writing by hand that relates to that. Here's a key event that goes into that. And they wanted to make all that dynamic and different per post in a separate area than the regular post content. So they wanted to have post content blocks up here, and they wanted this timeline dealio down here. Now, if you're a person who's ever built things like this before, your first inclination might be to go like for post meta or something, right?
That's
we'll set up some years and months and all that stuff, which is okay, I guess. But the downside is that if you're like a content editor person who knows nothing about what even barely understands what post meta even means, the editing experience of that is kind of poor. And the people that we were building this for were very used to having to do that sort of thing. So if we had built that, that would have been fine. But I thought to myself, like, this is a very visual element. It has animations and like you can expand or collapse the years in different parts of the stories and all this different stuff. So having that be a more visual experience just A, felt more like the correct WordPress way to do it. But then B, it was clearly a better idea. And so I explained, like, I could do this to the person who would actually be doing these changes. But what if we did it this way? And they're like, oh, that sounds dope. We should do that. And I, being a dumb person at the time, did not exactly realize that this was going to be a bit of a technical challenge, because I was like, oh yeah, I'll just stick another content block over there. But then I did that and I was like, that makes no sense, right? The post content block in WordPress, it normally just plucks out your post content. So, like whatever is just in the editor for that one post, like if you're a database person, you know that there's that post_content column, right? That goes in there. And so there's really no way to have multiple of those. It just shows the same thing twice. And it got me thinking to myself, well, I mean, what is the post content column? It's just a column that holds a string of text, which is the exact same thing that post meta does. So what if we, built these blocks to visually represent the timeline itself, the year, the month, and then like the individual timeline items, which could have a couple variations of like how they display. And what if we could just have those that get saved into post meta instead of just into the post content? At that point, then we could just kind of trick WordPress into displaying that stuff in another location. And if for people who aren't familiar with this, when you're using a block theme, which is what this site was doing, there's an option that you can use to say, show the template. So it shows the whole template inside, not just the post content. And so like when you do that, it shows the actual blocks that are in that template in the sidebar, but they're locked for like, you can't edit them or do anything, but you can click on them though, stuff like that. And in another area of the site, we had already done some experimenting. Shout out to Corey, my homie on that project, who was doing this before. He had kind of turned me on to this, that you can use a filter to sort of designate which blocks are actually content only mode and all that stuff. So it occurred to me that if we had the template visible and this other area was visible too, we could kind of just make that another place where you could insert blocks. Like the technical term I would use for this is an outlet of some kind inside of a template, right? Like you have the template and then you have an outlet where other stuff can go, and that other stuff could come from somewhere else besides inside the template. And so I sort of explored doing this for this company so that we could add this feature. And what I quickly realized is that there isn't really like a composable way. Like they don't really in WordPress core give you a simple function you can just export or something, or a hook to just do this sort of thing. I had to fork the post content block and make a copy of this internal hook that WordPress uses under the hood in order to do this, because it is very, very, very specifically designed to take things from the post content and from the post content only. And so it occurred to me after I built all of this, and I built kind of like an MVP version, not really like a plugin. It was just built into the theme. And I thought, man, this is actually kind of nice, because what if you had any other template where you wanted to be able to have one post, and I want to be able to put blocks here, I want to be able to put blocks there, and so on. And so that's where the idea for the block came together. And I also thought to myself, I just did a ton of work to make this even kind of work now. I strongly doubt anyone's just going to kind of casually figure this out anytime soon.
No.
And it's just like you have to be, and besides, you'd have to be so motivated to do that if you're not being paid to do it already, or something, right? And I wanted to put, so I was putting my thinking cap on here, like I wanted to put out a plugin that other people might find useful, that would be helpful to others. So maybe this would finally be that thing. And so that's what led me down this path. And so this plugin, what it lets you do is you can take a block, a content area block, you can put it inside your site editor template. And then you can say, I want to save the blocks to a certain meta key if you care. Otherwise, there's one that it registers for you for all post types out of the box, which you can turn off if you want. And so it does all that, it makes that really easy. So if you don't care about those details, you can just turn it on and it'll work. You can also say, I only want these blocks, or every block except those ones, that kind of stuff. So when we did this timeline implementation thing, I set it up so that, you can only add like a headline and a timeline block or something. So they weren't just like accidentally sticking YouTube embeds in the place where the timeline is supposed to go, and things like that. And then I did a few version updates to make sure it supported things like undo and copy paste as well as it can, and things like that. But yeah, it was really cool. Yeah. And as far as I know, there is no other plugin that does this in the WordPress space at all.
The bit that kind of caught me off guard was it's kind of why is there only one content area? What, like, I can see what for historical reasons why that's an interesting idea, but why couldn't you just, like, I don't know, like a plugin which enables you to have custom fields or something like that. This repeatable field that we've got, where we used to, you click plus and get another version of that thing, and then, let's have another one and another one and another one. Why not that for the content area? The ship is sailed there, but that just with the benefit of hindsight, that would have been such an obvious idea. Can I just read back to you in a way what you just said and see if I've got it right? So
yeah, sure.
If, let's say, for example, I'm just using WordPress posts, and I go into the template to display the posts in the site editor, and I stick your block somewhere, that then is a container for other blocks. So I've got the regular WordPress post editor where I can go in and write. But then when I'm creating a post, I go into the sidebar, click show template. That then will expose your block, which is a wrapper for whatever you want to allow it to be a wrapper for. So let's say, for example, you could do, text or video embeds or something like that. In a sense, you're doing the same job that we might have kludged with metadata. So we might have had a field for the text, we might have had a field for the YouTube embed, but in this case, because you've made it a wrapper and it lives in the template, you can put whatever the heck you like. You're not bound by the constraints of the type of data that meta field will hold. Have I got that about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say so.
That's better?
Yeah,
it's better than it was last time anyway.
It's actually analogous in a big way to like what you might do with ACF flexible sections in days of yore, right? You'd have like maybe you'd have a flex section and you'd output that as your main template content. But picture you just had another one of those things, which would then emit in the sidebar or something. And, speaking of the sidebar, this type of thing is felt especially relevant for sidebars, right? Because how many times have you thought to yourself, man, like especially in the past with widgets, like I have these widgets in here, but I want to have like a widget that is post specific. It appears in in the sidebar, in that separate area, but it's specific to this page. Like I was thinking about my course and I thought, what if and I didn't actually end up doing this later, but I thought like if I had resources that were less than specific and I wanted to list them over there or something, there's really, that's kind of the only way you can do that. And if you're doing that with just pure meta, you have to do like say ACF and stuff, you'd have to do a lot of work to indicate like what could show there. Somebody might say, well, you got a YouTube embed, but what about Vimeo? Or what if I want to put a list and there's only a paragraph, or all these different things? And it definitely strikes me as something that makes sense to be there. Because like what post content is, it's just a string of text.
It totally makes sense. I mean, as a user of WordPress, I can get my head around the fact that, okay, there's some metadata, it's held underneath the post editor, and that in the end will end up there. Okay, so just suspend your disbelief. That text, honestly, I promise you, it's going to go there when we publish it. And that video embed, it's going to go there. I promise you it'll end up there, even though it doesn't look like it'll end up anywhere. But the ability to, like, so you got the main content, and then in the template, you could have the sidebar. In the sidebar! And you can edit the content in place. Like, that makes so much sense. And from an editor's point of view, well, you can still have the metadata that you want to put in the, I don't know, the LMS or whatever it is that's showing how far you've got through the course or whatever. But then underneath that, on a per post basis, you've got any content that you want to write. It's so obvious. And honestly, I can't believe you're the first person to do it.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I naively thought, oh, sure. You can just do that. No, you cannot.
So why can't you just do that? What to just explore the nightmare that you've been through?
So okay. So WordPress, for those who haven't done any sort of nerdy extension level things, there's these packages like at WordPress /components or block editor and so on, where you can like take all these different hooks, React hooks and functions and all this other stuff to extend the interface. Like you want to add a new panel here or do something else there. There are certain functions though that are not exported anywhere. So they're not like something you can just use, or it's like a private function or a private API, you might hear it called. So in this case, there is a hook that's called use entity block editor. Okay. And an entity, when we say entity, it's just another word for like a post or a user or a term or something like that, like an object of data, whatever. So in this case, though, a post or a page. Pages are effectively a post under the hood anyway. And that function is just very, very, very explicitly designed to be working with the post content. The way that you update and set post content versus post meta is different. So it's not like you can just change one small thing to say, oh, it goes to meta now. It's not quite that simple. There's a lot of nuances there, and that function is not designed to be used for other things. On top of that, the actual post content, like if anyone is listening to this and you're wondering, man, how hard could it be? Take a look at the code for the core post content block. Yeah. And you'll start to get a sense of it immediately. Like for one thing, that block is involved because like if you, it has all these different things to make sure it doesn't render recursively. Like if you put a content block inside of something that has a content block, it won't just render it endlessly because I would crash your whole page and all this different stuff. So there's just a lot of very specific technical nuance that goes into achieving it. Okay. Like it uses this thing called the use inner block props, which is like when you're building a custom block, this is what you would use to decide what goes inside your block, if your block lets other blocks go inside of it and all that. And that is something you can just use, but everything that custom block does is just heavily custom. It uses certain unstable APIs, which is basically their way of saying, we might change this at any time, so you shouldn't use it. And if you do, it might break at any point, and we don't care if it does because you shouldn't be using it. And
right. It sounds like when we joined the call, before we hit record, it sounds like you may have stumbled into a bit of that over the last few weeks with the WordPress update to 6.9.
Mayhaps, man. 6.9 happened, and now I'm having a little bit of trouble that I have to go through and refactor, which ironically enough, so far does not appear to have anything to do with that ultra complicated hook itself. Oh. It appears that there's some template locking changes that have gone into effect. So if anyone from Core is watching this and you would like to tell me where I need to look, I would appreciate that. I'm probably going to cry uncle and hit up my friend Fabian as well. Yeah. Shout out Fabian. Yeah, okay. The man's a wizard. Yeah. When I was working at 10up, he kind of helped me. He helped me do my first Core contribution. He's all around a fantastic human being. I think Core is very lucky to have people like him and stuff, doing that kind of work. They really care about doing a great job, and it's nice to be able to have access to those people. So I'm gonna try to pull out all the stops to get this jamming very soon. But yeah, I'm confident it'll work out. My ultimate end goal, though, is if I make this thing super dope, maybe there's a way I can just fold it into core in the first place, right? Ooh. Because like the post content block it's like the exact same thing. The only real difference between these two blocks is that there's a few extra attributes for like saying, do you want to allow or disallow blocks? And it uses the different hook. Otherwise, it's very, very, very similar. So it strikes me as...
Have you done the allow and disallow blocks just because you saw scenarios where you wanted to disable, I don't know, certain things being added in? Like, could you strip that out if it was going to be a core feature? Could you strip it out so it really was just two content areas that allowed exactly the same, i.e. everything from the outset?
I mean, you could, but there's actually and I found this out when I was digging around and looking for the solutions here. WordPress actually has a supports attribute. Like for your block, you can declare it supports certain things. Mm-hmm. So it'll say like an anchor, which basically means you can add an ID and it puts a little box for you to type IDs in, so you don't have to do any of that. Mm-hmm. There is actually something like that for allowed blocks, right? Or not. So it seems to me to be kind of like, it kind of jives with the composable nature of things. I'm sure I could remove it. I'm not sure that we should, though, if you're going to do that, just because it makes it a lot more client friendly. Because like picture for a second, you're a news editor, like a person who works for a news company, and you're just trying to go in and plug in some content. If I gave you every single block that WordPress has available to say, stick in here, yikes. For one thing, you might wonder, which one am I supposed to use?
Yes, that's quite a few.
But then two, if you put the wrong one in and somebody's like, damn it, Janine, you used the wrong block. She's like, well, why the hell can I even pick it? Yeah. Why is it even in there? Right? That was kind of my mentality with this stuff is like, if I think that WordPress, as far as an editing experience, is currently lacking certain client guardrails like that, which they've started to do more of with content only editing and things like that. So that way you can have these cool block configurations, but you can allow somebody to edit things without tanking the whole setup.
Yeah.
So stuff like that I think is important. Really the only missing piece core wise is that use entity block editor hook. If I could refactor that to just allow you to save it in post meta instead, that would kind of largely solve the whole problem.
Okay.
But I think there's another piece that I would also like to see. And that is, we talked about you have to do show template to see the actual block area. That to me feels a little bit suboptimal.
You're reading my mind. That was going to be my next question. Can we not just skip that step, please? That way, just stick it when you click add post, just show me the template. Give me all of the bits and pieces there. That'd be handy.
That would be. I like the idea. I guess the one thing I don't like with my current plugin setup, and this is something I could probably solve for easily enough, like right now, but again, it's kind of a hack. Like if you're in the block editor and you do like the keyboard shortcut or you go to preferences and you say show code, you can see the block markup right in there.
Yeah.
Which you can't do with this because it only shows you the stuff for post content. If you had your post meta field that you were saving to down below, you could see it. And again, that's kind of like a type of thing that not everybody even does, right? But I think it would be nice if there was a way to do this in core, and then there was a way where you could have like maybe like a tab, or it would be like a meta box down below the main area that you could just click to say, this is the block area markup we're looking at stuff. This is all super easy to do. I don't want to say easy. That's the wrong word. I think it's very doable. It wouldn't cause a monumental shift or break the WordPress way of doing things.
I've just had some intuitions about that. And so when I click the show template button in every other scenario, I want to see the whole template. So I want to see headers, footers, the content, all of that. But in your scenario, I probably don't want the headers and the footers. I just want the multiple content bits showing, if you know what I mean. So I'd click some button or have that invoked automatically so that both content. I'm now getting carried away. I want 4 content areas.
You could do that with this block.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the idea of being able to choose either or, because I think there's a use case for either or, right?
Okay.
Like if you picture you had like in the example I was talking about with the news site, this block is kind of just like, it's in the middle of the page. It's in a group that goes like full width. So it's like the whole row. But if you had it in a sidebar, right?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
you might want to
Yeah.
know how wide is the actual sidebar, or like if you go to mobile or something and you want to be able to see that, because otherwise, if you just put it up in the editor where like it was the equivalent of the regular post blocks, it would just be way wider maybe than it actually displays. But sometimes that's fine. It doesn't matter. And maybe that's better. But like having the option, it totally seems like a thing where we could have our cake and eat it too. So
you'd have the sidebar showing as a sidebar, and it would occupy the correct width. And, you know, if you start typing and it overflows, it goes on to the next line and it's narrow and that kind of...
Do you want to see an example?
Yeah,
I have
well,
a screen share I can
no,
pull up for that
because
if you
we're
like.
only recording the audio. There's very little point. It won't get. It won't get seen. But okay, yeah. I'll tell you what though. If you wanna, I will link to anything that you produce that will demonstrate it, and I will put that into the show notes so people can go and see that.
We'll send you. We'll provide a link to that post.
Yeah,
for that,
perfect.
Because I have a video where I show exactly
That's
how
perfect.
this works.
Yeah,
And
let's do that.
And it's a very simple visual experience, and out of the box, like I said, if you're not particular about what meta field it needs to save in or things like that, it'll just kind of work without any special configuration.
Do you remember? I mean, you've got a lot of heritage, so it sounds like you probably will. Do you remember back in the day when Gutenberg, like when it was still wasn't in core, when they were just trying to figure it out? I remember this whole debate about like where even was metadata going to be held? There was no notion really about where that was going to end up. It obviously ended up in a bunch of kind of boxes, like almost like accordions underneath the content area, and there was flux about what would go into the sidebar, left sidebar, right sidebar, and so on. It feels like there was a missed moment right there where that your idea could have actually just jumped straight into core. Because at that point nobody knew where anything was going to end up anyway, so that would have been an interesting moment had you had that intuition. Well, it's probably like a decade ago now or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2017 was the year it was actually included in core properly, so it would have been just before that. But I mean, I don't know. I think that and I'm going to speak just from purely my own opinion here for a second, but I think that they had a very sort of laissez-faire attitude towards anything that resembled a new or vastly different feature with this thing. Like I actually, in the 2017 State of the Word, I actually asked a question about this. Like if you look at the broadcast, there's good old me in there asking this question. I was asking like, what are we going to do about like responsive controls, like for, doing things at different breakpoints? And Matt's like, we'll see. That was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a very broad use case kind of feature. Right. But I think that for a long time, the attitude for the core team has been, let's try to see what people try to make and what they want to do, and maybe use that to kind of inform on our product decisions a bit instead of getting overly prescriptive too fast. Pluses and minuses to that, perhaps. But I think something like this would qualify in there as we need to kind of make sure we do this correctly. Because if you do a feature like this wrong and then a bunch of people, millions of sites start using it, it becomes very hard to reverse course.
Yeah.
On any of those things too. So I mean, you're right though. Like there's kind of a point in time where you can sometimes make those things happen easier. Like while we're here.
Do you have any intuitions of doing like a pro version of this? So obviously at the moment it's on the WordPress.org repo. It's content-area-block if you're interested. But honestly, I feel that like your editorial team at the newspaper, I think there's a load of interest that you could generate with this, but whether or not you want to go in that direction, I don't know. It kind of seems like the sort of thing that once you've tried it, and it works for you and your team, there's no way you're going to go back to meta boxes, because this feels like it's much superior.
Yeah, and I think that there's as a side, and I'll try to answer this in a bit of a roundabout way, but I think that using custom blocks in a sort of parent-child relationship can provide a much better structure than just doing the post-meta thing. Like Sensei LMS actually does this kind of stuff where you have these different blocks, and and it's all for all the lesson details are inside these different custom blocks that have specific parent-child relationships. So you can create, because if you're using those things to create visual output in the first place, it's like, why not just do all of that up front? So it makes way more sense and it's composable. You can put things, you can do variations, you can do styles. and it all becomes way less of a maintenance burden. Now, for me, I thought to myself, well, what should I do? And I wanted to, I think, first release this as a free plugin because I've wanted to do that for a while, but I've kind of struggled with what am I going to do? It feels like a lot of the ideas I had would either be like way too similar to, like, it wouldn't be different enough than an established solution to really warrant the effort. And then, I don't know. I've always loved the idea of trying to give something back to the community because I have a course that I'm trying to sell, but I'm not doing that as a cash grab or anything either. I kind of did that because I wanted to make the thing that I wished I had years ago, stuff like that. And so I was looking at this plugin as a good, because I was kind of paid to come up with the main concept for it already, right?
Oh, so, I see. Yeah,
like,
with the project.
Like
yeah.
It's not like I'm out a ton of time, having to bring this to people. And I thought that it would be, there might be other people out there who had the same thought like me. Well, why can't we can just do that, right? And well, you can now, but not by default. And so I don't know, maybe if there is some way to do that, maybe I'd consider it in the future, but I didn't really do it with the explicit intent of making it commercial. I like the idea of that if it makes sense and there's enough legitimate value that I could provide that would make it worth that. So right? Like that's...
Yeah, I think the curious thing there is that because you're in WordPress all day, every day, and so am I, both of us have completely got over that hump of, okay, it's a meta field, the data goes in there and it'll end up there. But like map that confusion, which like is actually really confusing, like the million times that people are logging into their WordPress website. Wouldn't it be great to just have the content right where you kind of want it to be, and to be, that you can heap this extra content area full of all the bits and pieces that you need, and it's constrained, and only the blocks that the editorial team are going to allow you to have are available. Like, it sounds like nothing, but if you're an editorial team, that's like, how easy is that to teach the editorial? Not, okay, you got to go through it. Yeah, okay, we've told you this 15 times. You got to fill that thing out down there if you want the video to appear. No, we're now on 24 times that we've told you. You've forgotten it over and over again. Your system, that hump has gone. I think it's way more profound than maybe you're giving yourself credit for, to be honest.
Well, hey, I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a pretty sweet idea. Yeah. And it's in general like the type of thing that I think a person who doesn't have the baggage of like you were saying of like, this is how WordPress works.
Yep.
It's like if I'm just doing this in a way that makes sense to me, I should just be able to kind of put stuff where I want. And you could use this as part of a low or no code workflow to, like, if you're using like even ACF blocks or something to like construct blocks like that, where you're not coding all this stuff yourself, you could make your own custom blocks. You could say these are the only ones that are allowed to display there. And now you have a much more like streamlined client experience. Like if you're making this for other people, or if it's for yourself, it's just way less work, right? Like, I'm a developer. I write code all the time. I'm so comfortable with that. But at the same time, it's exhausting to have to make code updates and do a build and push stuff and all that just to make small changes, or just to say, I want to have certain stuff over here. And like when I'm just popping into my own sites to like make like I'm updating some lesson details or whatever, I love the simplicity of that.
Yes,
too.
Exactly that, right? It's just something. Honestly, I think with a bit of a fair wind behind your sails, I think this could be a real hit. I think it's, obviously I misunderstood it out the gate, but now that I've got a grip on it, I think it's a genius idea. And honestly, I think, why isn't this in core? It just makes perfect sense. It's called Content Area Block. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for a couple of things. The first one will be to actually the plugin itself. The next one will be to the video that you posted online, kind of explaining how it all works and what have you. That'll be the other thing. So you can kind of get an understanding if the .org website doesn't explain it clearly enough for you, which I am an example of that. But where could we find you, Ian, if we wanted to contact you sort of independently to get some more data and more interest about how it works? Where do we find you?
Oh, absolutely. Anyone listening to this, if you want to ask me questions about it, or if you run into some kind of edge case, you're like, man, it'd be really dope if it did this, by all means, you can reach out on Twitter. or X, I guess. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's my handle at basically all the things is Ian Svo, like IANSVO.
Okay.
There's also the I made a post about this on my course blog, which I suppose we'll probably include as a link because it has the video right at the top. So, you can put comments in there. There's comments on the .org plugin directory. If you're into GitHub and you want to make an issue or something and for the repo there, go for it. Totally all on the table. I want to try to make this thing as awesome as possible and as useful as possible.
A phenomenally good, like so self-evidently good idea in my book. So, Ian, thank you for building it. Apologies for butchering it on the live show.
It's fine. Like I said, I feel like you were in the right there. I did not explain it well. So I hope that my explanation has been improved. It
definitely
more
was.
People as well.
We'll meet in the middle somewhere. It was a bit of me and a bit of you, but now it's clear. Hopefully, go check it out. WordPress.org/plugins/content-area-block. You can go and find it there. Ian, thank you so much for chatting to me today. That's been great.
Been a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks very much to Ian for chatting to me today. If you enjoyed that, or even if you didn't, head to wpbuilds.com, search for episode number 458 and leave us a comment there. We really appreciate it when people leave us comments inside the WordPress commenting system, rather than shattering the whole thing across a bazillion different social networks. Again, wpbuilds.com, search for episode number 458 and leave us a comment there. Just a quick recap, if you want to be advertising on this podcast, head to wpbuilds.com/advertise, or just send me an email, admin@wpbuilds.com. We will be back next Monday for the live show. Tuesday, we'll package it up as a podcast, and we'll be back on Thursday for another episode, an interview, just like the one you listened to. So that's it. You stay safe. Have a good week. Here comes some cheesy music. Bye-bye for now. Thank you.